Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. As you know, here on the Pace Report over the years, I've had the honor and privilege of introducing you to musicians and bands that present music as well as their ideas in a very different vein by way of jazz, R&B, folk, jazz, and funk. And tonight here on the Pace Report, I'm going to introduce you to a guitarist who hails from the Ivory Coast by way of Africa. Guitarist, composer, and educator Constant Boty was recently here in New York recording a project that's very dear to him. In fact, the album, which will be released this upcoming fall, will be a tribute to the great Kofi Annan, who was the General Secretary of the United Nations. Now, Mr. Boty's guitar style reflects his native music of Ivory Coast, as well as his love for American jazz music. In fact, some of his favorite guitarists are Lee Ritenour, George Benson, and Bobby Broom, just to name a few. Tonight here on the Pace Report, you're going to see highlights of him recording his project, and we're going to sit down and talk about why he decided to come to the United States and why he wants to make his mark both here as well as his home native Africa. Also, you're going to hear interviews from some of the musicians that are on the recording, including the great Francisco Mela, as well as Lonnie Plaxico, and his music director and pianist, the great Benito Gonzalez. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of Mr. Constant Boty performing new music from his upcoming record here on the Pace Report here in New York City. It is an honor and a privilege to meet you. Welcome to New York. Welcome to Harlem.
Thank you.
You have had a tremendous day. You were in the studio, and you have some tremendous musicians that are getting ready to come for this upcoming project.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have my good friend and mentor Benito Gonzalez, and one of my music hero. It is Loni Placico on the bass, and different couple of drummers, Luis Santos, Francisco Mela, and Daniel Friedman, Daniel Prim, and also I have a great percussionist from DRC Congo. His name is Nkumu Katalai. Yeah.
Now, how is this project different from the last project that your debut project?
Well, this project is more of the model way of expressing my connection to jazz music and world music. But also, it is very different because it is a project dedicated to the memory of Mr. Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. So I took time to compose a song for him. So the project also expresses my compositional approach to modern music and so on. So yeah, that's the difference.
Now, you hail from the Ivory Coast, and what I really noticed about your first album is that you really stayed true to your African roots,
Yeah.
but you also have a love for classical music, and you also have a love for jazz and some of the other musics in between.
Yes, my background as a musician, a guitarist, it is a classical guitar. That's what I learned. And also, I've always been attached to our West African traditions. Like I used to say, Africa is very noisy. When I say noisy, it's like you always have music played somewhere, whether you like it or not. You can hear it. So it is growing up with all these traditional music that I hear every day, with my classical background as a guitarist, that I blend all together, and I wanted to make an album that introduces me where I come from. That's why I stayed very much attached to our tradition. So that's it.
Your guitar playing is very percussive, and you're also a percussionist also.
Yeah.
So how do you translate your percussion background, your drumming background, when you implement your guitar playing?
Well, when I am playing the guitar, I think it is an extension of the percussion, of the djembe, this kind of African drumming that I express through my playing on the guitar. So it is something that is innate, because most West African kids, when you grow up, you always have. It's like we can beat on the table and so on. So it is all these childhood expressions with the drums that I just express on the guitar. So it is a natural thing.
I was looking at some of your videos. I love your rendition of George Benson's "Give Me the Night." But again, you're laughing. But George Benson here in America is a jazz icon, and he's also a big pop and R&B icon.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show you that music is very universal around the world.
Yeah, I discovered at a certain time that music is really, really a language, because when I am playing the guitar, I know, of course, some of the modes, say, like the modes of the Aeolian, the Phrygian, and so on. I know how they sound. But in Africa, we have our own language, and our languages goes with some modes, So when I'm playing, I combine all these, and especially that song about George Benson, "Give Me the Night." I was just curious to play it how I understand it, and to create some improvisation with some of the languages from my tribe. So I always like to explore possibilities.
Now, you are a guru.
Yes.
And for my viewers out here, because Africa, in different African countries, you there are different languages and there are different tribes. Explain the musical culture and the culture of the guru.
The Guro people, they are from Central Ivory Coast, and they are the people coming from the north, like coming from Mali. Some other came from Guinea, Conakry, and they call them the Mande people. And the Mande people are also attached to other tribes in Mali and Niger, in that part of Africa. So our music is very much based on percussion, because when we migrated and came to Ivory Coast, we were looking for lands to farm, because Guro people are farmers and hunters. So most of the instruments that we express our musical activity were the drums, because we cut the trees and we put the skin of the animals that we killed. And so the music of the Guru people is mostly based on the rhythms. Of course, we have music for funerals and so on. And most of the time in our music, we try to imitate the sounds of the animals in the forest and the savannah. So the music of the Guru people is mostly based on human and their environment in the forest, imitating the birds, the voice of the animals, and try to be in relationship with them. Yeah.
You were telling me earlier that in the Ivory Coast there's over 60 tribes?
Yes, I can say even 62 tribes in Ivory Coast. Yes, because some tribes have their subdivisions, you know. So when we want to add all that, it can go more than 60. So in Ivory Coast, effectively, we have more than 60 tribes, and each tribe have their language, they have their intonation, and they have the way they sing, and their rhythm patterns, and so on. So there are different types of rhythms and style in each tribe. So it is really a cultural diversity in Ivory Coast alone, a country of 25 million people. Yeah.
were telling me something over dinner, and I just, it's funny, you know. The one thing that I really love about doing these interviews is that I get to learn about people from all over the world, and we were breaking down some very important guitarists in your eyes. You know, Lee Ritenour is very, very important, and there were two other guitarists too that I want my viewers to get a gist of who you dug.
Yeah, you know, I told you that every day, like a Christian reads the Bible, I have three guitarists I listen every morning and every evening before I sleep. Bobby Broom, Kevin Eubanks, and Lionel Loueke. I don't know. Of course, I can't play like them, but just listening to their music and the way they approach the melody and the rhythm makes me believe that I am connected to them. It's like I respond positively to the sound they play. So these three guys are really my guide. Yeah.
Bobby hails from Harlem. We stepping on his home ground, and Bobby is such a very, very well. He's a very soulful cat,
Yeah.
but he also really understands the tradition. You know, he's now professor at a big university now in Chicago, and Bobby also played with the great Sonny Rollins too.
Yeah.
So he really brought a whole, and then he did some really eclectic and very funky things in the 80s too. His diversity is very, very intact. But when you said Lee Ritenour too, I was like, wow. And Lee did some things that every decade that he did his solo thing, it really did something to his musicianship, whether it's the Captain Fingers to the foreplay. What was it about him that you thought just kind of opened your eyes as far as his approach?
The first time I heard Lyrics Now was on the album of Foreplay, you know. And I think Lee has a kind of playing that expresses a different genre of music, especially when he's playing that is guitar, the silent guitar. I can hear some African words through that. He has an album that is titled Smoke and Mirror.
Yeah.
That album has some tracks that have some deep African language. So Lyric Now for many times since the Foreplay album, I've been following him, and he's also one of my hero, like I told you earlier.
Lonnie Plexico and I played a couple times together in New York, and he's a great musician. I think he's like one of the most uh, accomplished bass players. You know, play with Art Blakey, Cassandra Wilson, play with many people, and you know, it's always a thrill to play with him. It's like he made things very easy for the music, and he's perfect for the project, and the rest of the band. I mean, you know, you hear it. It's like they have so much spiritual. They bring so much spiritual energy to the project, and the music. Actually, you know, African music is very you know, rhythm influenced. So, you know, since Francisco Mela is from Cuba, I am from Venezuela, Boty is from Ivory Coast, and we are like a good unit that brings people together. That was the idea of doing the project. When I talked to Boty, you know, we was you know, talking about it, that, you know, the purpose, I think the purpose of being a musician is to bring people together from different cultures, and as we play live, like in somewhere in Europe or in Russia or in Japan, they don't speak English, but they relate to the music. It's like you know, music has like no language. We are just playing the music for the people and give it a, you know, giving that happiness in case they need it, or if you want to dance, you can dance, or you do whatever you want. But that the purpose is to bring people together, and you know, different cultures, and I think it's perfect because African music is the link of all the rhythms that we play. You know, in America, it's like straight ahead. We play all these great rhythms. In Brazil, it's all Africa. So interesting enough, when we play Boty's music, we find ourselves in there somehow because we are influenced by all these great rhythms. So you know, we have we had a great time producing this. Is, you know, and it's a nice project. So I'm looking forward to have the album in my hands.
You studied classical guitar and modern guitar and musicology at the National Institute of Art in the Ivory Coast. Now that's where Lionel Lewicki
Yeah.
also studied also.
Yeah.
You've been blessed to leave the coast and go all over the world and teach. What does that do for you as a musician?
You know, about the teaching, it is just a possibility for myself to to arise in two ways. The first way, it is to learn as a human being to be very humble with my approach to humanity, because of being with children. I know how I had to dig into myself to stay quiet and inspire the children in some very difficult time. So that was one part. And the second part, I learned from masters that you learn the most when you are teaching. So these are the two motives that inspire me to experience the teaching activity. And I was blessed to be the director of a project by the German government at the German Swiss International School, where it was a project that is aimed to promote the German language in the German schools abroad. And I had a chance to interact with children from Ghana, from Germany and Ukraine. So it was a rich experience. And one time we went to Leipzig in Germany, and we had different teachers teaching different classes. And all of a sudden, everybody was excited about my teaching approach to the kids on West African songs and drumming and so on. So it is really a great experience of sharing, learning, and growing. Yeah.
I remember you told me earlier this evening, and you said in teaching music here is totally different than teaching music
Yes.
in Africa. And you told me about the approach about how you had to be the comedian,
Yes.
but explain that concept, because remember I told you Dizzy Gillespie was kind of in that boat here when he led all of those different bands.
You know, like teaching in the West, like in America here, there is a lot of talking. You understand? But teaching in Africa, the teacher himself has to be a master. When I say master, it has to be someone who has the gift in many activities. Though it must be a comedian. When I say comedian, like for instance, you are teaching kids how to sing. You must tell the story, but sometimes the story is not always by speaking. It is also by miming uh, the animals or the nature that is involved in the spirit of the song. So that's make most of the teachers in Africa. When I say teacher, I'm not speaking about necessarily the teachers in academic schools, but the teachers in the village. Also, sometimes in the academic, you know, the teacher has to be somebody who can mime some of the what he want uh, to to give to the students as information. You understand? For instance, when you go to, I went one time to the University of Ghana, and one of the teacher in African studies who was teaching some African songs, while he was writing the lyrics of the song, he was trying to mime some of the dances of the spider Kwekwanase, you know. So he was miming it, and also he was kind of making the students to understand where the story come from, and how the fact is to let the students assimilate the information by body language and so on. I think the language of the body, the language of miming, is very very much involved in the teaching process in Africa than always making students to see through mathematics. Like for instance, I was playing drums with some guys, and they asked me, where is the one? But I myself, I did not know the one, but I was just playing, and I wanted the guys to just stay quiet and listen and get the song by the vibration of their heart, because each person receive information differently. So it is for the responsibility of the teacher to know how to do it, and others will look at it and assimilate the information according to their method or their way of understanding information. Yeah, so that's really the difference between the teaching method in Africa and in the West.
Tell me about how you first met Constant Boty.
Uh, when he wrote me 6 months before the project that we are doing now, he reminded that he came to see my band 2 years prior to that. He saw my band live, and it's coming to the US for the project. So I don't recall of having some sort of longitudinal relationship where we were talking all the time, but I recall him reminding me that he met me when I was doing a show a couple of years back. So we didn't speak until the time that he reached out to me to say he would like to get me involved in a project that he's doing.
What are your impressions of his compositions and playing the music in the studio and recording this?
He studied jazz, but it reminds me of myself, because I didn't go to school for music. Because most of his music has a lot of spiritual element, and the composition are the mix of rhythm, bass, melody, and then elements of harmonies coming in as everybody comes together. So there's a lot of rhythm and melody involved in the changes. And so it reminds me of how I approach music myself, when I write my composition. And the rhythms are very complex, but they sound very basic in the listening of it. So it tells you right then that there's a spiritual element are communicating within the sound.
Yeah.
When was the first time you met Constant Boty?
I just met him last week when we did the first rehearsal for the recording.
What do you think of his music?
I think that his music is so deep and so beautiful. I got no words because I'm just like, wow. I'm really, I can say I'm connecting or playing with one of the young lions from Africa, playing that deep music. It's amazing. What he's playing, maybe he don't even know what he's playing, but it's amazing. It's only what I say.
You coming from Cuba and him coming from West African, how similar are your country's rhythms and Mother Africa's rhythms when you guys played it?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have to say that Cuba is being we play Cuban music. The Cuban music have have that African elements, and so I won't say that is only from Cuba. We always recognize as a Cuban that Africans really, were like giving us that kind of rhythms. So it kind of transforms in Cuba, but to answer your question, when we played together, it was like a real immediately connection, because he's trying to tell me or explain to me his sitsei, which I have my own sitsei, and at the end of the day, it's the same meter. It's sitsei. With whatever accent I bring him or he's bringing, but it's sitsei. And when we match and play together, I could see the conga play like, he was like, wow, this is so funny. So it's great. We play the same rhythm. We understand that language.
just have to ask you, Lonnie.
Yeah.
The first time you heard Constant music, what was your take, and what was your take when he asked you to record this project with him?
When I first heard him, I could hear that he's going beyond the boundaries of African music, blending it with different things. It's already rhythmic. But I could tell he's been checking out some of the musicians in America, and I can hear those things in his music. And so I was curious, about, how would it would be like to play with him? Because I like the direction he's going in.
Going into the recording studio, what were your thoughts? Did you have any reservations about what you were going to bring to this music and this project? And what did you think of the compositions going into it?
I was just open-minded and just the composition. I like the compositions. I was just thinking, how can I add to it more so than anything? What can I bring to it?
Jazz is a music played by a jazz musician. That is one thing. And now, who is a jazz musician? A jazz musician is someone who is endowed with the language of Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker, and sometimes Miles Davis. Because it is the verbs, the language from all these three masters that we use to connect with other culture. Because when I take, for instance, the story of Dave Brubeck, when he went to Turkey, right, as a jazz ambassador, he has used that vocabulary to connect with other culture. So jazz, of course, it is a music played by a jazz musician, but that jazz musician understand the language of the masters. So jazz is now a connector, and I believe that with time, jazz is like something that is just as the universe expanding, you know. And the more you say jazz is dead, you are not expanding. You are just being yourself in your area, and you don't know that people are seeing that your music is even boring. But the more you expand, the more you are even into the concept of jazz. So, you know, I've said so many things, and I believe that jazz is just the connector. It is expanding, and you have to have that language to keep expanding it with other culture, because it is one of the easy substance that can connect to other music. Classical music is there, but it is hard to connect it with African music. But jazz,
Because it's European.
jazz, you can go to China, and with that verb, that language, you can connect it with Chinese music. So jazz is expanding, the world is expanding, the universe is expanding as jazz is expanding.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. Make sure you go out and support Constant Boty's brand new upcoming CD, his tribute to Kofi Annan, which will be available this fall. For more information on his upcoming tour dates or to order his CD, please visit him online at constantbotymusic.com. I'd like to personally thank Mr. Boty for his time. Also, I'd like to personally thank all the musicians who I interviewed and profiled for this interview. Also, the staff and management at Mashiko Studios for their warm hospitality. Remember, visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. And please like, share, and subscribe to my videos both on my YouTube and Vimeo page, and feel free to leave comments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.